We are Unicode, and basically, to put in very simple words, we're the coolest club of this college. And those who don't agree, say hi. इनको बाहर निकालना. चलो, good. सबको बैठना. Although, yeah. So, anyone has any idea what HackPrep is? Like, the word itself is pretty self-explanatory. Does anyone have any idea what HackPrep means? Thanks for the contribution. Yeah. Any guy, any person, again, lecture नहीं है जिसका मन करे हाथ रख के आंसर करो. No one's judging you to be a proactive. क्यों ये बंदा बोलते जा रहा है क्या बहुत समझता है? No, nothing like that. So, is there anyone who has an idea what HackPrep actually is? कि ऐसे आ गए workshop में? Yeah. Okay. बहुत सही. सही बोला. HackPrep. Hackathon preparation. Right. So, since we have only taken 50 bucks from you guys, we're not taking a large amount, so refreshment भी वैसे ही रहेंगे. Every question you answer has a small refreshment, that is a necklace. बीच में भूख लगी तो एटलीस्ट necklace आएगा, क्वेश्चन आंसर करते रहना. Right. Okay. Moving on. So yes, this workshop is. Okay. So let's continue on. So yeah, this workshop is simply not to prepare just for hackathons, but as you guys go on now, a large amount of you guys are here simply because of your interest in coding and in development. A lot amount of you guys will also know what coding is. Maybe you guys have done some programming languages, and maybe you're thinking, "Arey C आता है, Java आता है, Python आता है." Like I know all these languages. I'm sorted in life. Software engineering, Lowell, Amazon, Google. I'm just here to tell you that's not the case. Sorry to let you down. So not only are we preparing you for hackathons, it's helping you prepare to hack your way into life right now. Because programming is so much more than just knowing programming languages. And Unicode being a development student chapter, we are responsible, or we basically make development applications. And here's what today is basically we are here to let you know what all we do and how is it that. Like what technologies do we use, or what knowledge do you need to know to handle yourself in hackathons, or to handle yourself in basically becoming a developer. We are cover all these stacks that you can see here: Node, Django, Flutter, HTML. किसी को भी नाम पता है HTML छोड़ के? Okay, HTML छोड़ के. Has anyone heard of any other stacks? Just shout, hey! Hey, no one knows these stacks. I see you have an idea. Okay, great. So that's good. This workshop is successful. That means you guys have no idea. That's what we're here to tell you. And today we're going to be doing Frontend and Node. Frontend and Node.js. That's basically we're covering a part of Frontend as well as backend today. Our speakers are here. We have Deep and Karishni. We have from here Aditya Thakur and okay, these three guys are there. ये तीन बहुत हैं. Okay, these guys are pretty much knowledgeable, and these are the best people who will be able to guide you in at least that is React and Node.js. Okay, I wish you all the best for this entire workshop. Please try to stay as much as possible. This workshop is simply meant for you to know that there is a lot more to learn in coding, and a lot more to develop yourself with. Okay, all the very best, and hand over to Deep. And let's start HackPrep. Sorry, I'm back again. So we have just two more announcements. One announcement is that if you have any doubts, because yeah, the speaker is going to be constantly teaching through the mic, and he might not be able to see all of you all. That is why we have specially our beloved SEs and some other Ts here who are here to guide you. They are your seniors, and they are well versed in these subjects already. So if you have any questions at any time, let's say someone's teaching something, let's not interrupt the speaker. Let's have a one-on-one conversation. So just quickly raise your hand if you are stuck anywhere at any point of time. One of our team members will quickly approach you and help you solve the issue. Okay? And yeah, this is a bit how we did that. Okay, someone answered a question. The speakers will keep asking questions. If you have a good answer, एक आएगा तुम्हारे पास है clear. Right. since we're starting with this hackathon, no sorry, hackathon nahi hai, right, many people have this confusion, ye hackathon hai kya? This is a workshop and series of lessons, let's say. We will be giving you beach make break for going out and taking a break if you have to, get some fresh air, visit the loo or get something to eat. But while the session is going on, to make sure that the session is not disturbed at all, we request you to not go out as much as possible, only unless there's a very critical emergency. Only then please try to step out, because the entire workshop might get disturbed by just you leaving. Because there are a lot of spike guards and a lot of wires, we don't want you tripping over and making your way out. Okay? Is there any questions so far? Great, there shouldn't be any questions so far. Is there anything else you know? Okay then guys, let's begin with HackPrep 3.0.
Hello everyone here. A very good morning to all present here. Once again, we extend a warm welcome to you all for the first session of day 1 of HackPrep 3.0. My name is Deap Daru. I'm one of the front-end mentors at DJ Unicode. I'm one of the speakers for the front-end session today. In this session, we'll be covering HTML, CSS, UI, UX, and JavaScript. Pretty sure you all knew that while registering. So, without further ado, let's get started with the session. So, I'll start with the intro to web dev. So you guys must be aware of websites, right? We use it in our day-to-day life for literally everything. To scroll through memes, while locked down to get reference during tests and exams. We've used it all, right? Now someone has to develop them. And development consists of 4 main components. It is design, front-end, back-end, and deployment. Now you might be wondering why the front-end circle is large, right? Anyone has any ideas why? No? No one? Yeah.
That is a more reactive thing. The user reacts to it, so that's why it should be more important.
Fair enough. Unfortunately, all the components are equally complex. I'm just saying that this is the front-end session. इसलिए बड़ा रखा है मैंने. Sorry for the trick question. Anyway, let's start. So, web standards. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah. First of all, obviously, I'm gonna talk more about front-end. What front-end does is it shapes your website. The user is going to directly see तुम लोग का front-end on the web page and understand what the website is trying to do for them, right? It has to be intricately designed so that the user can just visit the website and understand what's going on over there. Let's say there's a new website like Facebook in 2008 or 9 when it was created. No one knew how to use it, right? So the UI needs to be good enough, clear enough that the user understands what it's trying to say, what it is, what its purpose is, and how it is displayed to you, right? Okay, with that, let's move on to web standards. So no one particularly runs the internet, you know. Interesting fact, right? How is it actually managed? So there are these 3 groups that proactively take part in maintaining the standards of the web. Like, so I'll just skim over briefly skim over the evolution of browsers that took place. So in 1993, HTML and the other browsers came into play. And what happened is soon that there were proprietary tags that came into account. Now tags is something I'll explain in HTML, but for now just imagine if some features would not be visible in Chrome, but would be visible only in Safari. Would that be good? सब एक ही website, 2 browsers पे नहीं चल रहा. So all of these issues started coming in, and there was a need to standardize the tags that we use, or at least like the structure of the languages that we would use. And so I guess you might have heard W3C. It is mainly responsible for standardizing HTML. HTML5 was brought in by them. So World Wide Web Consortium is the main player, basically. Moving on, request response cycle. Sounds complex, isn't it? Like, how do you actually see the website on your web browser? You just put in the URL and you get the website, right? Easy. 2 steps hai, ho gaya. Not really, those are just the 2 end steps. There are a few steps involved in between. Mainly ये 5 hai. There are more intricate details here, but let's just focus on these 5. The first is browser looks up the name in the domain name in the domain name server, DNS. What is the domain name server? It's just a repository that holds all these domain names and their IP address. Key value pair जैसा समझो, ठीक है? So domain name क्या होता है? It's www.google.com and उसमें एक IP address होगा, वो उतना return करेगा. Simple. So second step is that DNS returns the IP address. Now, what is IP? Internet Protocol, right? It is a way of communicating कि कौन सा computer is located where in a network. If I'm to very basically say that. And URL, Uniform Resource Locator. That is what actually locates the IP address, right, in the DNS. So, what happens is the browser sends an HTTP request to this IP address, and in return it gets all those files that it can display on the browser. That's the third step. So जो भी IP address है वो तुम लोग को पूरे files भेजेगा, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, everything, images, static जो भी files है सब कुछ it will send to you, and तुम लोग को वो मिल जाएगा on your browser. So sort of it like downloads it on your browser so that it can display it. And yeah, I guess that was the 5th step, that the browser downloads, takes this response and then does the HTML code. Sometimes what happens is, ये 5th step में it tells that we need additional files. So JavaScript है, CSS है, all of that is mentioned in the HTML का code, and that is then fetched again. So sometimes the 3rd step, 4th step and the 5th step will take place again if it needs something more. If you visit some other page and उसमें कुछ अलग images है तो वो fetch करेगा फिर से from this IP address. Understood so far? Great. So let's move on to this another concept, and this is a interesting and important concept of why frontend has these 3 languages. Like backend और वो सब में एक से हो जा रहा है, right? ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा framework चाहिए. इसमें भी है framework इसके भी ऊपर. But why 3? Why HTML, CSS, JavaScript? एक रखो ना कुछ. Easy life ना सबके लिए. Not really, because what happens is that the code can get really messy. Like frontend में भी saw ना कि we need to take care of everything, like how the display is clear होना चाहिए वरना user will get confused. So to go over the definition of this, not gonna lie, I've copied it from Wikipedia. I'm sorry. Separation of concerns is a principle for separating a computer program into different sections. So like front end है, उसमें we create 3 different sections. Each is pertaining to a particular concern. So like you can see this image, right? HTML is the skeleton system. This is an analogy of our own human body. Front end is split into these 3 different parts. HTML is the skeleton system. JavaScript makes up for the muscular or the nervous system. Both are, you can like, you get it, right? If I'm expressing myself right now, my brain is thinking what to do and it's telling my hands, right? So muscular and nervous system are involved to dynamically change my hand movement. So that's what JavaScript does. And CSS, style. It shows like skin color, hair, everything. Your display, basically. So HTML is just the layout, JavaScript, functionality, CSS, style, display, appearance, everything. And with that, let's get started with HTML. Now, I hope you all have your setups ready because we'll code in a while also. What is HTML? Firstly, hypertext markup language. So now, I guess, so far. So, it is basically a file that conveys the browser what it needs to display in terms of the content. Like I have opened this on canva.com, right? So it needs to say okay, the title should be what is HTML, the content should be HTML is a markup language, right? So that is what it does. Sirf text और content और वो सब वो देगा, it won't style it for you. And what is a markup language? Does anyone over here know? So a markup language is a computer language that uses tags to define how the content should be within the document. Okay, in case you didn't understand, it's just a basic human readable language. It's not a programming language as such. It just tells you कि ये tag है तो header बना देना, ये tag है तो paragraph बना देना, ये tag है तो link या वैसा कुछ. So based on that, it just tells कि what the text should look and should display. So hypertext. The word hyper means that it is not linear. And you can see, right, the web is structured in a way that it's not linear. If I want to go on Google, I just have to type google.com and I will go there. Once if I find some other link, mouse pe click karunga, I'll go there. Nothing happens in a linear way. There is no set of order that you need to follow. The web is a complex web of connections, and that is what hyperlinks is. Hypertext, hyperlink is the same thing, basically. So yeah, as I mentioned that W3C was the main player. That has standardized HTML5. HTML1 was brought in 1993 by Tim Berners-Lee. Irritating factor, but anatomy of HTML document. So now let's actually get our VS Code out so that we can practice this. Intro.html file. So yeah, in case you don't know how to make this file, do one thing, open your VS Code from your desktop. Okay? Everyone ready with it? Just give me a thumbs up or something. Sorry. Chill out. Hi. Great. अभी तुम लोग फाइल से न्यू फाइल क्लिक करना. दिखाई नहीं दे रहा. हाँ. So once you've created this file, you all can tell me directly अगर नहीं दिख रहा है तो इन लोग के थ्रू बोलने की जरूरत नहीं है. I'll just do it. ठीक है. दिख रहा है क्या? और ठीक है. वेट, I'll say the code. Don't worry. अगर नहीं भी दिख रहा है तो you won't get lost. ठीक है. So anatomy of HTML document. The first line over here says doc type HTML. We always start our HTML file with this doc type declaration. What does the doc type declaration do? It basically tells what language we are using, which markup language we are using, and uska version. Two things. ठीक है? So doc type HTML says that this is HTML. There are other markup languages that also use this. That's the only reason why we specify. So yeah, that's the reason we mention it. HTML5 में we don't really need to write version और वो सब. वो पहले we used to write these long ass line कि ये version है वो version है. HTML5 really simplifies it for you. So let's code it. So I'll start from scratch. Arrow bracket, exclamation, कैपिटल में डॉक टाइप, फॉलोइंग सो फार ग्रेट, फिर HTML in small caps and end arrow bracket, closing arrow bracket, ठीक है. After this we mention an HTML का tag. So arrow bracket, opening arrow bracket, HTML, closed arrow bracket. उसके बाद फिर से arrow bracket slash HTML again and closing arrow bracket. Follow so far? So HTML tag is the root tag of your file. ठीक है. All the content that goes in HTML will be under this. I'll just give you 2 minutes to follow so far. Can any mentee tell me if people are following? है ना? Cool. I'll proceed. Great. So HTML के अंदर there are 2 tags. ठीक है? Head and body. So HTML wraps around these 2 tags, head and body. उसके भी दोनों के distinct purposes है. Head will store all the metadata on your web page. Now what is metadata, right? It is the data of your document, but not really the data that is shown, the data about the data of your document, metadata. So for example, it contains stuff like author, keywords, समझो तुम लोग को character set लिखना है उसका, या फिर even styles, scripts, everything is contained over here. The title of your web page is also contained over here. वो जो ब्राउजर पे ऊपर दिखता है, let me show you this thing. ऊपर you can read, right? HackPrep Frontend. I'm sorry you won't be able to read it, but ऊपर ब्राउजर में HackPrep Frontend लिखा है यहाँ पे. This thing. So that is the title of this web page. All of this is in the meta, is in the head का tag, the meta tags. So let's code that. HTML के अंदर next this, there should be an indentation, so just like clear हो code. Zoom, ठीक. How about now? So HTML के अंदर head, and inside of that we'll specify title. I should switch off my GitHub Copilot. Yeah. So far done. So head के अंदर we have this title element. उसके अंदर we write HackPrep 3.0. Now the second part that I was talking about, एक था head, second is the body. So body. Now over here, whatever we write will be displayed on our web page. That is the whole purpose of body. So far, let's catch up once again. 3 elements over here. Doc type declaration tells what document you are using, your HTML and the version. HTML5 will just write HTML. It's good. Now head that has all the metadata. Body has all the content that can be seen on the web page. Follow so far? Yeah, we just write something. So body के अंदर write a P tag. What is a P tag? Paragraph. Now hit save. Just a second, I'll zoom it for you guys. So ये जो intro.html तुम लोग ने जो बनाया है फाइल, right click on it and open in browser. Okay. On the left side, your file must be there. Right click on that file and click on open in browser. Okay, done. So this is what you should see. Followed so far? Does everyone have this on their screen? Title में HackPrep 3.0 होना चाहिए and content में welcome everyone. ठीक है, so one question. Who can tell me what 3 elements are there in this document? Raise your hand. Anyone? Yeah, go ahead. So what was the first one? What is it called? What is that tag called? Doc type declaration, right? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so we saw the anatomy of the HTML doc over here. This is how the document should look. But let's see how the element should look and what it consists of. We talked about it while coding, but I'll go over it in depth. So the element consists of an opening tag, content in the middle of opening and the closing tag, and in the end closing tag. Okay, I'll move forward. There is one more thing in the tag that can be contained. It is called the attribute. Now pay close attention to this because attributes are an important element, important factor of an element, and basically it customizes an element in the way that you want it to be. For example, cards. Like LinkedIn pay, if you see, let me show it to you. So let's say I go to my network and नीचे यहाँ पे there are these cards that come, right? These cards. So it has a class that is given to it because they all look the same, right? Similar, बस content अंदर अलग है, but all the display वाला चीज is the same. सब में title है जिनका नाम है, their positions, what all they want to show, their mutual connections, connect का button. This display is the same, right, for all the cards. So it is given one class ka attribute for it. Okay. What is class attribute? Just basically tells that all the properties that I want an element to have to multiple elements in my document, that class will be assigned to that element. So it can be given to multiple elements. जैसे हमने देखा in LinkedIn, the cards all are given this class value. Now there is another important attribute that is called ID. Now ID is only used for one element throughout your document. It should not be repeated, right? So it has this specific application or specific set of programs that you want that element to have, and वो उस पे ही होना चाहिए. So let me give you an example. LinkedIn पे this show more का button, I don't see it anywhere else, right? At least for invitations, ठीक है? Like show more यहाँ पे भी हो सकता था कहीं पे. There is see all, but that is still different, right? So show more must be having an ID that specifies what to do for that particular element. So ये पेज में एक ही उसको ID assign होगा and that should not be replicated anywhere else. Because अगर वो functionalities are implemented somewhere else also, so it will mess up your whole web page, right? So ID, unique, class, multiple. These are two main attributes that we will use throughout for HTML at least. So let's discuss some types of elements that are there in HTML. Two types, block and inline, that we see on our screen right now. So what is block? So now we see here, ये जो p tag था, that is a block element, a block level element. Why block level as such? I'll show you in the browser. As you can see over here, if I add another element इसके नीचे, let's say another p tag, saying next line, and I'll reload this page. You see how it came on the next line? यहाँ पे क्यों नहीं आया? Welcome everyone के next में. What if I want to do it that way? नीचे नहीं चाहिए मुझे बाद में चाहिए था. But it came नीचे ना. So that is what's called block line, block level element. It will take up the whole width of your viewport. What is the viewport? Yes, the browser's width that it consists of. ठीक है? That is called the viewport. This whole screen. If I reduce the size, then this much. Only from here to here. पीछे का VS Code का जितना भी पार्ट है वो नहीं, सिर्फ इतना ही. So if I like decrease it too much, तो ऐसा होगा. Okay. So the next line will still go below that. So this will take up 100% width. So that is what block level elements are. The next type is inline level elements. What I said कि मुझे अगर welcome everyone के next में चाहिए कुछ. So let's do that. Welcome element के नीचे I'll write span का एक element. Now what is span? It's an inline element that says कि इतने span में I want to put some content. And based on it you can customize it using CSS, JavaScript, जो भी है. But that is span. My bad. What you'll have to do is इसको इसमें ही रख लेना. In between this. So let me zoom out a little so you'll understand what I've done. So welcome everyone के next में I've written the span का element. ठीक है? आ गया अभी बराबर. So that is what inline elements are. If I change the span to p tag, okay, clear? P tag is block level element. Span लिखा तो inline. There are certain elements that are inline like span, link that we'll explore next. Then there is div, p tag. All of those are block level. Cool. So moving on, there are some nested elements, and we just saw them, right? Actually, we saw them in anatomy of HTML का doc, because in it we are nesting elements, right? HTML tag के अंदर we nested head and body. Body के अंदर we are nesting p tag. This is called as nesting of elements. For example, over here. In this p tag, I've nested this span ka tag, right? So this is what nested elements are. Now there are two ways to write it. One is right and the next one is wrong. The next one will give you validation ka issues in HTML. What is validation issues in HTML? Just syntax errors. It should not be coded in that way. It's not like it's going to break. The browser will try and resolve that error, but definitely it should not be coded in that way. Because this is like a minor thing, right? यहाँ पे I've just switched between the tags, the closing tags of span, p tag and strong tag. But in case of big HTML code where multiple and complex elements are involved, what might happen is it might break your code or some functionalities might not work. Because you've written wrong syntax for the browser to interpret and understand. So this span should have span ka ending. It should not have p ka ending and then p wale ko maine span ka likh diya. Understood? This is wrong. Should not be mixed up. Just a second. Great. So I hear you all are getting all the basics really well. I'll move on quickly now. Empty element, basically just an element that does not have the closing tag. No content, no closing tag. जो भी है इसमें ही है. So image tag is one of those. जिसमें you mention the source, where the file of that image is, and it will display the image. ठीक है? Headings. Another important thing. Every document needs a heading, right? You can't read all the content. You need to know where to navigate through the document and see what the important part is. For example, blogs. You need to read the heading should be there to tell you which section में what information is there, right? So there are 6 levels of headings in HTML. H1 till H6, and this is the representation. वो कैसा दिखेगा along with the size. If you type it like if you code H1, तो वो ये size का H1 heading will be shown on your web page. There are just 6 levels so that subheadings and everything can be there. Your document is structured. One good practice is to have just one H1 on a single web page. H1 is like for good reasons of coding and clean coding. Only one H1 should be present in a document. उसके नीचे mention है H2 as many as you want, H3 till H6, ठीक है? Moving on, lists. So there are 3 types of lists in HTML. One is unordered list, second is ordered list, and the third is definition list. So why 3? The first one is there just because it doesn't have any specific order, right? For example, list of grocery things that I need to buy. So I'll just specify them in an unordered list so that I can see कि हाँ ये आज खरीदना रहेगा. Ordered list में there is a particular order and it matters. For example, today's timeline. First order में the front-end session. Second order में it should be Node.js session, right? So that is ordered and it matters. Definition list is nothing but the definition for each title. Like there will be a title list में JavaScript, for example here Java, PHP, .NET और उसका फिर definition दिया होगा. It is also known as description list otherwise. So these are the tags that are used for it. UL, OL, DL. Pretty basic, right? Next, we'll go to links, and this is important. We've been talking about hyperlinks so far, and this is the tag that handles it. So this is an important element that actually makes hyperlink possible, and the reason why HTML and everything exists. This is what redirects you to different pages on the web. The href is what redirects you to that particular link. For example, here I have written DJ Unicode ka website. So let's code this out so that we can try it. Below this, I'll write A tag. Now what the full form of A is anchor tag. ठीक है? इसमें write href. So just type inside the href https colon /2/ DJUnicode.in. Following so far? And inside I'll just mention Unicode website. So this will be displayed on the on my web page, and it will redirect to the link that I have mentioned in href. Href is full form for hyperlink reference. Just redirects there, right? I hit save. So as we see, this is the link, right? Blue में आ रहा है, underline है. If I click on this, I have the Unicode website over here. So that was all about links. Now moving forward, inputs. Inputs are very important because that's what enables the user to provide information or contact us वाला form और वो सब जो होता है websites पे, that uses these inputs to collect the data from the user. That is its whole purpose, to just get the data from the user. So there are a number of inputs that are available in HTML: text, password, email, number, date, color, radio button, checkbox, and everything. Now let me show you something interesting. So over here, let's say I want to sign in. Now this password का जो text है, this is the input field, right? I will enter my password here, and the website will say that it's either correct, you can proceed to your account, otherwise it will say that this is the wrong password. Now the password always is not shown यहाँ पे, right? So let's do one thing. If you are on this website, right click on this particular element. Go to inspect. This web console should be shown to you, where you can like play around with the HTML, see the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, everything. So inspect it, you will see the HTML ka element. Over here we see the input tag, right? And input tag mein there is this type called as password. Input, type, password. It is continued in the next line, ठीक है? This thing. So, for example, let me change this password to text and hit save. My bad. Just hit enter and it's done. Now you can see my password, right? It's no longer hidden from the user. So this is how HTML handles different inputs. The type specifies whether the text should be shown or not, whether it is plain text, so दिखा दो, password है तो don't show it. And yeah, so you can basically hack LinkedIn, right? अभी कोई कुछ भी लिखेगा, you can see the password. So अभी if you try to go on to LinkedIn and you type your password in someone else, वो देख लेगा, बराबर? Wrong. If you just hit reload, and you'll understand this why in Node in the backend sessions, that when you hit reload, you no longer can see what I have changed, right? So yeah. Anyway, moving forward. try to see if you all can hack Facebook. Just the same way that we did it for LinkedIn. I tried that only. Anyway, so with that we come to the last element that we will be discussing for HTML, that is buttons. Buttons just enable a user to interact with the website. For example, वो जो form था, जो inputs लिए थे, if I want to submit that data, button, right? So buttons just are clickable and they let you submit form or do any standard functionality throughout the website. So let's have a quick recap, and I'll be asking questions and throwing chocolates at you all. Anatomy of HTML. Anyone can tell the 3 types and what its purpose was? Raise your hands. No one? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Doc type, HTML.
Yeah.
And
And
body.
doc type, head,
Body.
body. And purpose क्या है?
Doc type तो for language and version. And
Yeah.
head gives the heading. So this is the meta phase.
Meta what?
Meta data.
Yes.
And body is the content.
The content for?
Web page.
And what is done with that content?
Well,
It is shown.
yeah.
Great. Then the different types of elements. Who here remembers the 4 types of elements that I've discussed so far? Yeah.
Body, empty elements,
Yeah. 1.
input, that is not.
No, I'm saying types of element, not the exact element. Just the types that I was discussing. कि ये अलग-अलग types के होते हैं. Yeah.
Hyperlink elements के लिए empty elements and ones like body वगैरह.
So see, empty elements के अंदर there are elements like image, break line. So those are the specific elements that you are talking about. I'm talking about the types of elements like empty element. दूसरा क्या था?
Unlisted, listed, order.
नहीं, that was list में है. Yes, who was that? Inline? Yeah, nested. Then? Yes. Yes. So those were the 3 and you answered 1. Aditi, give them all 3 answered 1. So those were the 4 types of elements that we browsed through. The next is the elements that you all were talking about, the individual elements, heading, lists, link. There are too many elements in HTML. I would strongly recommend you to go over it after the session. There is tables, a lot of stuff that can be done with HTML. Anyway, with that, I'll let Karishni Mehta come to the stage for the next session. Thank you so much. Just one quick thing. Anyone has any doubts with HTML? Yeah, go ahead.
When I open my file in the browser and I click on the links, the website is not ready.
You mentioned the href? Anything wrong with the href? Any mentee that can guide him, please? Anyone, any other doubts that you all have regarding any concepts or something? Great. Take it.
Hello. Hey guys. Can you hear me? I'm already behind. Okay. So I'm Karishni Mehta. I'm the Frontend and Design Mentor here at Unicode. And okay, so right now I'll be teaching you all CSS, which is Cascading Style Sheets. So what is CSS? So earlier you all learned about HTML. So you all learned that HTML is the structure of the page. But it does not have any color, it does not have any font, any style, which is basically very boring. And if you want the user to use your website, you will have to make it interesting, exciting, fun to watch. So for that, we'll use HTML. We'll use CSS. CSS describes how HTML elements are to be displayed on the screen, and CSS is a style sheet language. So okay, so now I'll show you the website. So basically, with CSS, you can, for one HTML page, there can be hundreds of ways you can style it. So by just changing a CSS file, you can just change the layout, the look, the theme of the page. So basically what this website is, that the HTML page of the website remains constant, but when I click over here on any one of the designs, you will see that the whole layout of the page changed, the style changed, the colors changed. So to show you another example, here is another. So you can see that everything here has changed. Again, the style has changed, the whole theme has changed. So, and the content remains same, like the heading is same, the paragraphs are same. So that is what CSS can do. So it's a very powerful tool to use and a pretty simple one also. So this is the anatomy of a CSS rule set. So this whole thing you can see here, that is called a rule set or simply a rule. So here the P, which is an example here, if you had seen in HTML, there is a tag called P. So that is a selector. So what a selector does is basically there are multiple elements in the HTML file. So and you wouldn't want to apply the same properties and same colors to every element. So to select or to specify which element you want the properties to be applied on, you'll have to choose a selector, and we'll read more about the selectors later. After the selector, there will be an opening bracket, the curly opening bracket, and inside those brackets, you'll have to write a property. Over here, the property name is color, a colon, and then the property value and a semicolon. So this is how a CSS rule set looks like. And one rule set can have multiple properties. So if you want another property also, suppose background color. So after this semicolon, you just have to press enter and you write that property and then the property value. And property plus property value both are called a declaration. So CSS selectors. So there's not one type of selector. There are various types of selectors, and some of them are element, class, and ID. So if you all remember, while Deep was explaining HTML attributes, he mentioned that there were class and ID attributes. So those are CSS selectors. So what the element selector does is, you can see an example here on the top right corner. It chooses a HTML tag or element. You learned about tags, which are, it could be the P tag, the list tag, the UL tag, LI tag, and you would have to write properties inside those tags, inside the brackets, and that values will be applied to all the tags on that HTML file. So if you have multiple P tags, all of the P tags will be styled using these properties. The next selector is the class selector. So in the class selector, class is an HTML attribute, and it's just in the HTML tag you just mention class is equal to and the class name. And in the CSS file, it would be written as a dot and the class name, and then everything else remains the same. And the ID selector is also very similar to class selector, in the sense that ID is an attribute which you would put in an HTML tag, and that ID would, and in the CSS you would represent it as a hash and the ID name. So here it is para1. Everything else again remains the same. So you would be asking what is the difference between class and ID because it sounds very similar. So the only difference is that in class, multiple elements, HTML elements on the HTML file can have that class and name values same. So the center class, you could apply that to multiple elements. But for ID, the para1 ID can only be applied to one HTML element. It cannot be repeated again in that same file. So how do you add CSS to an HTML file? So there are three ways to do it. There is an external CSS, which is adding an external file and referencing it in the HTML file in the head section. So here on the top right corner, you can see there's an example of how you can link external CSS file. So here the link, there's this link HTML element which you will use. The rel is equal to style sheet just specifies what kind of file it is referencing to, and the href again just specifies the file name. Then there's internal CSS. So internal CSS is when you would write the CSS rule sets inside the HTML file. So in the head tag again there would be a style tag, and inside the style tag there would be a rule sets. Then inline CSS, when you add the style attribute to the HTML element. So over here you can see that there is this P element, and in that you have added a style attribute. And inside that style attribute you have written the property and the property color. So as a good practice, it is always better if you use external CSS, because then it's just better, and only if you have few changes, like if you want one property different, you will have to, you can use internal or inline, but it's always better to use external. Okay, so do you all have any doubts till now? So can anyone explain what is the difference between ID and class?
ID is specific for one element and class can be for more than.
Yeah, in one HTML file. Yeah. So CSS specificity. So there can be a case where two selectors point to the same HTML element. So in that case, a hierarchy will follow. So the hierarchy is inline styles, IDs, classes, and elements. So just for an example here on the code, this is an internal CSS. In the style tags, there are three rule sets. There is the ID one, which is demo, the test, which is class, and P, which is an element selector. So, and here you can see in the body element there is a P tag, and inside the P tag there is ID and class. So all three styles basically point to this P element. So in this case, the ID in the hierarchy, the ID is higher. So this P element, the font color will be blue. If the ID was not there, it would have been green, which is for the class. And if both of them are not there, then obviously the text would be red. And in our case, when the P element, where if there was an inline style written as style attribute equals to the style, equals to the property and property value, it would take that color. So CSS is all about boxes. So most HTML elements on your page can be thought of as boxes sitting on top of other boxes. For example, let's take this card. Suppose this is one part of a website. So it can be thought of as one box, and which is made up of multiple smaller boxes. So this image is one box, the architecture text, that is one box which is sitting on top of another box. This icon is a box, and in that way there are multiple boxes which make up one whole box. So similarly, a website is one box, and inside that there will be different elements will be boxes. So this is the box model. Box model is essentially a box that wraps around every HTML element. It consists of margin, borders, padding, and the actual content. So here you can see in the image, the content is, suppose for example, let's take a text. So suppose we take hello world. So your hello world will be inside the content box. The width and height of the hello world will be the width and height of the content box. And the space outside that is called a padding. And a border is an element. Border is a boundary that separates one element from another. So the space between the content and the border will be padding, and there's also space around the border which is called margins. So using CSS properties, you can basically control all these margin, borders, padding. You can change the value of it. For borders, you can change the color. You can change the style. So these are some common CSS properties. So there's background color, which would change the background of the document. There is color, which would change the text color. Font style, font family would change the font family, which is the font type. And font style, it will maybe change it to italic according to the property value. Then there is margin left and margin right. Basically, you can change the margin on the left hand side, margin on the right hand side. Text align would align the text center, left, right, or anything. So basically, CSS properties are very easy. They're pretty self-explanatory, and you don't need to remember all these properties. But some common properties which you will by default remember because you just use it in every project you build. So responsive websites. So basically, you all must have opened a website on your laptop, and the next day you might have opened that same website on your phone. So you must have noticed that the website, the content remains same, but the layout may change to make it better suited for a smaller screen. So as Deep had mentioned, viewport width. So basically, as your viewport width changes, you will have to change your website so that anything is not left out, any information is not left out, and it is presented to the user in such a way that it is readable and the user can easily navigate through the website. So it is called a responsive web design when you use CSS and HTML to resize, hide, shrink, enlarge, or move the content to make it look good on any screen. So this is very important, and in every website you will build, you will have to make them responsive, or else it just won't work. So now I'll just show you some CSS HTML code to better understand. So basically, this is not an actual website, obviously, and it's just for your reference. So here you can see that this is the HTML file, and a CSS file would look like this. Just a second. A CSS file would look like this. There is the selector, the brackets, the properties, multiple properties, and you can have multiple rule sets here. So this is what the page looks like. This is what the page looks like right now. So here you can see that my cat is very grumpy. That element, the whole sentence is in one line, but here the grumpy is outside. So can anyone tell me, seeing this code, can someone tell me why this in the first line the grumpy is proper and the second line it is not? Yeah, so basically the P tag, the closing P tag is before the closing strong tag. So that's why this error, not error, but it's not aligned properly. So if I change it to here, you can see that now it's proper. So now let's see about the CSS selectors. So here in the style sheet, so T, li. So basically, when you want to add the same property values to multiple elements, you can just instead of copy pasting it and writing, you can just use a comma and separate them. So here these properties will be applied to the P element and the li element. Then there is a class called green, and there is a class called blue. So we have not discussed about this selector. So basically what this selector does, that this selector, the font size and the font style, that will be added to all the elements in the HTML page. So and this has the lowest specificity hierarchy. So even if an element is selected, this will be overridden by that element selector. So here you can see the li element has the color red, and here the li element is milk and water is in blue and green. So can someone tell me why? I'm sure yeah, so basically right. So so the class and ID, it has a hierarchy on CSS specificity. So that's why that will override the P elements. Similarly, even here this has a class green, so it will not follow the property values of P. So does anyone have any questions with this code or something? Okay, so I'm assuming no questions. Okay, yeah. Okay, so in the HTML file and the CSS file, so in the CSS file, you can just write you can just start with this, like your selectors, your brackets, the property values and the closing bracket. Yeah, in a new file. So you can have other, you can add the CSS into the HTML file. You can just add a style attribute, and then you can similarly write P and then write your property values inside. That is internal CSS. And if you write style is equal to and the property values, then this is inline CSS. So you usually avoid using these. You usually just prefer using an external file. Got it? Any other questions?
How to leave the external file with this HTML file?
Yeah. So this line, you see this line, the link tag. So here this specifies what kind of file you are adding, and this is the file name. Okay. Any other questions? So just a quick recap. Can someone tell me the anatomy of CSS rule set? Someone else, if possible. Anyone? Okay, yeah. Ask. Okay, perfect. Can someone name all the selectors we have covered and the specificity hierarchy?
Selector, ID and class.
Yeah, and what's the hierarchy?
First,
Selector is the type, selector is the one category, and inside that you'll have element selector, ID selector, and class selector. So what is the order, hierarchy? Yeah, okay. Can someone show me tell me what the box model is, like just describe the 4 parts of it? Yeah. Go ahead. No, you go ahead. Yeah. And okay, and then we also covered responsiveness. So yeah, so this is CSS. Now, anyone has any questions? Anything?
So in CSS, the full form is cascading style. So like, what is that style? Cascading.
So cascading, like you could, yeah, you can see here these. So basically, just comes one after the other, cascading. So now I'm assuming there are no more doubts. So we will move on to the next. Okay, sorry, yeah.
Can you show the CSS?
The CSS file.
In the first line color, how did you get that box?
So that's just VS Code specific. So depending on the type of code editor you use. So basically, if you just in VS Code, if you just write red, the box will automatically come. So you don't have to worry about that. Yeah. And for ID, there will be an hash. Sorry?
Can you just repeat what you said about the idea?
Yeah, so basically the full stop before green specifies that it's an ID selector and the hash before blue specifies that it's an ID selector. Oh, sorry, full stop is class and hash is ID. Got it? Any more doubts? So basically, the class attribute can be used in multiple elements in an HTML file, and ID can only be used once. So here we've used class over here with the same name, and class here, class green is also used here, so that is fine. Over here, ID is equal to blue is only used once. You cannot repeat that same ID anywhere else in the same HTML file. Okay? So I'm assuming now no more doubts. And if you all now have doubts, please reach out to the SEs, they will solve it. And now we'll move ahead to the next session, which is our UI UX design session. Guys, can you please maintain a little bit of silence? Guys, if you have any doubts on CSS and HTML, please raise your hand. We have the second years roaming around. They'll come to you and solve your doubts. Hi guys, we're starting with the design session for HackPrep. Okay, I'm Palka, I'm the Frontend and design mentor in Unicode, and along with Karishni, we're going to just give you all a basic understanding of what designing is. You're not going to be implementing anything, but just an overview of what actually is involved in designing. So this is, just to give you all a brief, this is what Apple's website looked like in 1997 and 1998. And this is what it looked like in 2018. And this is basically why design is important, because imagine buying Apple products from this website. Apple wouldn't be what it is with these websites. And basically the whole design process is just asking yourself a bunch of questions and then finding solutions to those questions. Like where to start, what to think about, what are the requirements of your client, what UI will you need for your website, what all features to add, just as many questions as you can ask yourself and then go on answering them along the way. And now there are two main components to design, which Karishni will be explaining, that is UI and UX. So you all must have heard of the words UI, UX, and contrary to popular belief, UI is not equal to UX. There are two very separate things. And so basically UI, which is the user interface, UI generally deals with the interaction between users and applications. So basically UI is how the user will interact with your website. So it can include screens, so it will be a website where buttons are laid, where your text is, how your text is designed, the font of the text, the style. And in certain cases, it would also include keyboard, sounds, lightings used. So everything, all that comes under user interface. So what is UX, user experience? UX deals more generally with a user's overall experience with a brand, product or service, and in our case it would be a website or an app. So user experience fulfills the needs of a customer, and it ensures that the customer seamlessly achieves the end goal which they had in mind when they came to the website or app. So basically when they first come to your website, they have a goal, they want to do something, they want to achieve something, and your website should be such that they are able to do that in such a way that they are not overwhelmed with it. So usually, taking an example, usually you must have seen your grandparents or parents, they are not very familiar with technology. So when they are using websites or apps, they get overwhelmed. They are like, what does this do, what does that do? So the job of a UX designer is to minimize those feelings, is to minimize the negative feelings which they have when they use your product or website. So now focusing mainly on UX. So why do you need UX? So there are some examples on the screen. So UX, like your website or this app may look very nice. It may be very aesthetically pleasing. But if it is not very functional, if it does not do what it's supposed to do, then there is no meaning in it. Like you can see this mug, this cup, it looks nice, but it is not actually very functional. You can't actually use it. So you can say that UI would come under UX. UX is a whole big umbrella, and UI is just a subset of it. Next one.
So elaborating on what Karishni said about UX, these are the 5 main steps that is involved in the process. The first is research, where you're finding out the requirements, you're making user flows, you're making user personas to identify your target audience. Who is going to be using the design, who is going to need it, what all features are going to add, all that will come under research. What other similar products are out there, all that comes under research. Then the next step is ideation plus design, which is where the UI is actually involved. Like Karishni mentioned, UI is just a part of UX. So ideation, design, building wireframes, building actual, what kind of buttons you want, what kind of colors, fonts you're going to use, all that comes under this step. The third is prototyping, where you're actually connecting all your wireframes. If you're making an app, you're showing the flow of from one screen to the other screen in prototyping, and it's the actual product that you will show to users or to your clients to test it out. The fourth step is testing and iterate, where you perform various tests like A/B testing, guerrilla testing, all of that to check whether what you've designed is actually working for your target audience or no. And lastly, it's evaluating, which is all the feedback you've collected from the testing phase, implementing that into your design is what comes in the last step. And how you do all of this, these are just 2 examples. The first is information architecture, which is just basically, it gives you a brief about what is the architecture of your design, what all screens are there, what is going to be connected to what, all that is what is information architecture, how your content is structured, how it is layered. Another thing is user personas, where once you've identified your target audience, you just make up fake people, you give them hobbies, you give them skills, goals, and you basically frame out why would they be using your app, or what their needs are, what their problems are, which your product will be solving. Other things that are involved in UX are site maps, then testing again. So there are a bunch of things before you actually start designing the UI of your product, which is all this, which is UX basically. And UX is not just the designer's responsibility, whether you want to be a software engineer, you want to be a developer, if you're a front-end developer and you've got like 0 design skills, you're not going to be able to replicate the design effectively. Design is, if you want to be project managers, design is something that you're going to have to be really good at, because you have to design the whole architecture of your product. So when I say design, it's not just colors and fonts. That is a very integral part of your product, but it's not just limited to that. Moving on to UI. Okay, so far, does anybody have questions about what's the difference between UX, UI, or what all comes under UX? We're done with the UX part. I don't think there are any questions. If you all have further questions, there are design mentees in the crowd who you all can ask. Moving on to UI. Colors is one of the most important aspects in UI. So there's a basically when you're selecting a color palette for your product, you select primary colors, which you're going to be using the most in your app or website. As you can see over here, blue and black and white are what you have used most for this particular card, where blue is the call to action, that's the CTA button, which is getting highlighted, and for the backgrounds you've used black and white. And then secondary colors are what you use for like say underlining text or for showing an error message, just things that are not very standing out in your website or not very important, but you still need colors for. And usually you don't select more than like two or three primary colors. That is for like good UI for your website. And contrast is another thing that you have to keep in mind when you're selecting your colors. As you see in the first two examples, the text is not very readable because the color kind of blends in with the background. And in the last two examples, the text really stands out. So that is what you have to keep in mind when you're also selecting your colors and colors for your text. Thinking about X user, this is basically, I don't know if you all know, but there are tools that you can use for, say, colorblind people. As you can see in the example, people who won't be able to differentiate between red and green colors, this form validation will be useless for them. They won't understand that they've entered a wrong email. So basically you can use tools, or while you're designing your product, you have to keep in mind all kinds of users and design accordingly. Otherwise it will just lead to bad UX for your product. Typography is another very important aspect of UI, which is basically what fonts you're using, what font size, what font spacing you're using, and it has to really reflect your brand message and what your brand speaks about. I mean, if I'm a lawyer firm, I can't be using Comic Sans in my website. That's just horrible. And just basic do's and don'ts for using fonts. If you use too many fonts, or if you use, again, unreadable text on background images, or too much or too little line spacing, all this is just self-explanatory that you all can go through. Even when you're emphasizing a particular text in your website, how you emphasize it also makes a lot of difference. And these are just some good fonts that we've used over the years and we found that really work well for us. And moving on to white space.
So white spacing, it is basically the importance of nothingness. So what is white spacing? White space is the space between two elements. So suppose you have two buttons, the space between them is called white space. Even space between two lines of text, even that is called white space. So here is an example of good and bad white space. On the left hand side, you can see that the text is spaced properly, and on the right hand side the text is too cramped. So for the user, it will be easier for the user to read when it is properly spaced. Even too much spacing is not good, so you need to find the balance between them. This is another example of white spacing. So here also, in the example above, it is spaced properly, it looks nice, it is readable. And on the example below, the font size is too big, there is no space between it, so it just it does not look good and it's not easy to read also. So Google is a really very good example for white spacing. So basically Google, the front page, the home page of Google is basically a white page with only the logo and the search bar. So that just directs the user to what Google actually is, a search engine, and all the other information may be in a smaller font. It's written in the below or on the top. So basically, just Google just directs the user to do what it actually is made for. Icons. I'm pretty sure everyone has used icons, has used icons when they're on websites, apps. You all know what icons is. So some of the properties of icons are clarity. The icon should be clear to see, and the user should know what the icons wants to communicate with the user. The icon should be readable. It should not be too jumbled or too messy. All the icons, like you will use more than one icons in your website or an app, and all those should be consistent. If all the icons are filled with black, if one icon is filled with black, everything has to be filled. If one icon is an outlined icon, like this one, all icons should be outlined. The alignment, the icon should be aligned properly with other elements, and even icons themselves, like in the play button, the triangle should be aligned properly to the circle, or else it won't look good. Brevity. So basically here there are two icons, which show a ship. So the one on the top is too much detail, and even though it can look good, icon with less detail but which communicates the use of it is always preferred. Even and personality, like instead of using some standard icons, you can like make your own icon, you can add some color to it. That would just make your website or app stand out. Visual hierarchy. So now when a user comes to your website, they do not have time to go through the whole website or an app. They'll just like glance through the first page, like they just probably read the title, and if that website is not what they are looking for, they will move on to another one. And your job as a designer is to make sure that the user stays on your website for as long as possible and they keep coming back to the website. So visual hierarchy. So in visual hierarchy, you give importance to certain elements. So the most important element is going to be the biggest, or maybe you highlight it in such a way that the eye of the user is drawn to that element first, so they can know what it is. So visual hierarchy refers to the organization of the design elements on the page, so that the eye is guided to consume each design element in the order of intended importance. And how can you do that? You can do that by using anything. You can do that by typography, sizes, colors, grouping, white space, or anything else you can think of. The main idea is to highlight that element, so you can do that using anything. This is one example of hierarchy. On the left hand side, you can see the price, year, mileage, seats. All those are written with the same font in the same size. But on the right hand side, the year, mileage, seats, which are not very important, are written in a smaller font, and the actual value of those is in a bigger font and it is in bold. Same here with the price. You do not need to know the price. If there's a dollar sign, people know that's money and it will be the price of it. So that is how you have to create a visual hierarchy. So basically, when you are designing, you have to detach yourself. You have to remember that you are not the user. User is someone else. So if you like something, if you think that this is good, you have to even. It could be a case that you think it is good, but actually for the actual users, it may not be good. It may not be usable for them. So you have to keep in mind. So that is where the UX research comes in. Even after design, you have to keep on researching that. How is the feedback, if it's good or bad, what the users want. So yeah, that is it for design. Thank you guys. If you all have any doubts. So can anyone tell me the difference between UI UX? How much have you all understood? Yeah.
UI is user interface, and it's only a communication between the app or website and the user, and the user experience is the overall experience.
Yeah, perfect.
Can you all explain what is prototyping in UX? Yeah, prototyping is just connecting wireframes and then depicting a blueprint of your product. Yeah, that's all. So we're like pretty much done with the session. Yeah, and all the things that Karishni and I mentioned might seem very obvious, but it's surprising how much common sense people lack when actually sit to design. So even if any of y'all ever get into designing, just keep all of this in mind, because it might seem really fundamental stuff, but it's actually very important.
And like design is one of the few fields in technology industry which does not require coding. So maybe in when you come to the second year, third year, and you're like, I don't like coding, but you still want to be involved in the tech field, you can pick up UI UX as your career, or maybe to just learn more and explore more. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay guys, we'll take a short 5-minute break for y'all, and then we'll start with JavaScript. So settle down. So JavaScript, we talked about it, right? Interactivity बढ़ाता है of your web page, dynamic elements लाता है in your web page. It is the muscular or the nervous system of your web page. So yeah, JavaScript is the programming language of the web. अब तक जो भी पढ़ा वो markup language थे, HTML, CSS. This is the programming language. So this is where all the logic is involved. This is what will manipulate your website, show or delete some elements in it. जो भी like modifications कर रहा है ना website में is happening through JavaScript. You can see in this image, right? Photos और वो सबसे connect कर सकते हैं. Speakers, audio, phone, everything and anything. This is a very high level image, but this is what JavaScript does. It simplifies it for us. We don't actually have to handle it, right? So JavaScript brings in the dynamic element, but why learn it? In fact, even HTML, CSS, JavaScript are all why learn it? So if you are not able to read the statistics that are put up on the screen, JavaScript is at 64.96%. HTML and CSS is at 56.07%. What is this? It is a Stack Overflow Developer Survey of 2021, which states the most popular programming. So hear me out. Programming, scripting, and markup languages. सब कुछ include करके these are the most popular का list. And there were 83,052 responses. उसमें से ये है. So you get it right. And I guess this is not, this doesn't come as a surprise. Why? Because there are so many websites. और वो चलेंगे कैसे? HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Without it, it won't run. Your browser is set up on these four languages, right? यही compile होगा browser में और तुम लोग को देखेगा. ये है ही नहीं तो web ही नहीं. So JavaScript, that's the reason why it's the most popular language out here. This is the 9th year in the row as the most commonly used programming language. Since the last 9 years, it is dominating this position. And this time, even HTML, CSS is second. So, yeah. Now, let's see how many gamers we have in this hall. Does anyone recognize this?
1.6.
Nice. And so, ये green वाला जो window है वो क्या है? Nice, great. So console, important thing in JavaScript. It is your best friend, ठीक है? Because browser में तुम लोग console पे you can run your JavaScript. So I won't mention वो कैसे, like you must be knowing ना कि languages compile होते हैं या interpret होते हैं, either of the two, बराबर? Browser also has a JavaScript engine that will just compile the JavaScript का code. Let's not get into the details, just होता ही है. Browser कर लेता है manage, so we don't need to look into it. And console के through we can use it, we can code it. So actually start with the coding. So everyone just open a new tab, first of all. And I mean everyone. I will ask questions and I want you all to answer. Who? Give me a yes. Great. So, do you see this thing? Can I? Let me. थोड़ा ऐसा कुछ दिख रहा होगा तुम लोग को. एक्स्ट्रा भी चीजें शायद आ सकती है नीचे. जस्ट उसको निकाल देना विंडो से. This is what you should have on your screen. This is the console. ऊपर लिखा भी है. And we used it for inspect, right? Inspect में हमने element देखा था. This is the console. So console के through, we'll start with the coding of JavaScript. So the first concept in JavaScript is variables. Variables, ठीक है? Like let's say maths का कुछ function है कि x is equal to 10. अभी ये code में मुझे करना है, तो I'll have to declare a variable and I'll have to assign it the value of 10. Right? So in JavaScript, what we do is we use a var to declare a variable. So let's say var x is equal to 10 semicolon. This whole statement will give 10 ka value to x. This x is a variable. Now there are certain rules of what the variable name can be, and for good reason. So variable names can contain letters, digits, underscores, and dollar signs. If you don't know underscore या dollar sign, तो third point में है dollar and underscore. Now names cannot begin with a letter. I'm sorry, names can begin with a letter but should not begin with a number. That will give you an error. Let me show you. Now let's say VAR 8 or 3 HackPrep is equal to 3. I'm giving it a number ka value. Syntax error. This is not accepted. Okay? The number can come behind the letters and everything, but it cannot come pehle. Although underscore is allowed, so var underscore HackPrep is equal to 3. This will run. Ignore the undefined for the moment. Okay? So this thing runs. If I now type underscore HackPrep and hit enter, 3. Working. Great. So there are two ways to actually declare a variable. 3 in fact. So one is var, second is let, and the third is const. Now let me show you in the console. And I strongly advise you all to follow along also. अगर मैं fast जा रहा हूँ, do let me know. Type this thing on your console. Let So, okay, about the undefined, let me explain it to you all. This statement doesn't really return anything. It just assigns the value of 10 to Unicode. So, जब ये run हो रहा है, the console is just giving undefined because इसमें कुछ output नहीं आ रहा. Now, if I type Unicode इसके नीचे, so it's giving me 10. It's not giving me undefined, right? Undefined is nothing but you are not specifying any value for the variable. तो undefined है वो. The moment you give any value, वो आ जाएगा उसमें. One important thing is that JavaScript has dynamic it does not like for example Unicode. अगर मैंने उसको 10 का value दिया and after that I give it a string का value, it will accept it. It won't give you an error. In case anyone has done other programming languages, C या कुछ, उसमें int या float वैसा कुछ mention करना पड़ता है. यहाँ पे that's not required. For those who don't know, it's fine. So let Unicode is equal to 10. Now I'll change the value of Unicode. Unicode is equal to 20. Done. But now const test is equal to 20. Abhi test has the value of 20. Right? Now I want to change this. I want to say test should be 10 because Unicode को मैंने 20 का value दे दिया. Error. So once you say it is once you say that it's constant, उसका value change नहीं कर सकते हो. It remains constant. That's the whole purpose. ठीक है? So these were the three types of three ways of declaring variables. Yeah, moving on. Names can be case sensitive. Small case y, capital case y. Both will have different values. ऐसा नहीं है कि both are the same. And reserved words cannot be used as names. So variable name, because so these are called keywords. ठीक है? Something like var, const, let. All of these are keywords that JavaScript uses to know okay, you are trying to declare a variable. So use var, use let, use const. If you do this, it will work correctly. But now, if I say var, and I want the variable ka name also to be let, equal to 22. This shouldn't work, but it does. Great. Okay. But var, this thing won't work. Give syntax error because you can't use the keywords as in to give you a particular value. So don't use JavaScript keywords for anything like this. Next, we have data types. So I mentioned that other languages usually tend to stick to one data type for a variable. Like you have to initialize it like int variable is equal to 10. तो वो 10 का फिर तू string नहीं डाल सकता उसमें. So which data types are there in JavaScript? Let's see. There are 5 over here, right? String, number, boolean, array, and object. So let's look at each of them individually. String, anything that has text in quote marks, right? Quotation marks के अंदर जो भी होगा, that will be treated as string. फिर वो number भी होगा तो it's string. If it's in the quotation marks. Yes, boolean मतलब true and false, basic, binary, 0, 1. Number is anything, number. Numerical value है तो number में. फिर int, float ऐसा सब नहीं है JavaScript में. For those who have done C or something, इसमें everything falls under number. 12 है तो number, 1.0001 है तो भी number, सब कुछ number. Then comes array. Arrays are nothing but lists. Like let's say I want to store my to-do list आज के लिए. Reach seminar hall on time, which I failed to do. Then start the front-end session at 9 o'clock. All of these should be there in a list, right? How will I store all of this in a string? Not possible. एक list चाहिए that I can have all of these things in. And fortunately, JavaScript allows you to have different types of data types in the array. So there can be numbers, strings, ये सब जो भी mention कि array के अंदर array घुसा सकते हो, सब कुछ कर सकते हो, ठीक है? Objects, everything. And about objects. So objects come under curly braces. So curly braces के अंदर usually they have certain properties. What is an object? चलिए तो JavaScript में you can write के var variable is equal to curly braces में you mention some properties something something हो गया object बन गया. But what is it? It is a representation of anything in the real world. Let's say for example a car. So a car has properties like name, Fiat, the model number, the weight, the color, mileage, blah blah, जो भी है. So you can include all of those properties in the JavaScript object. Following so far, right? Great. So let's actually try to see how we can code objects in the console. So var car is equal to opening curly braces, hit enter. If you hit enter, ऐसा कुछ दिखना चाहिए. There will be an indentation that will happen naturally and keep it. Now inside this, specify the name. We'll give this car a name, let's say Maruti. So one thing to note here is कार का जो वेरिएबल है उसके बाजू में इक्वल टू साइन है, बट जो प्रॉपर्टी है उसके बाजू में इक्वल टू नहीं आना चाहिए. दैट इज द कोलन. डोंट मेक दैट मिस्टेक. प्रॉपर्टीज के बाद कोलन, वेरिएबल के बाद इक्वल टू असाइन द वैल्यू. नाउ कॉमा, एंटर, color. Let's mention the color of this car. What do you all want it to be? Green. Cool. Hit enter. Closing curly braces. Hit enter. Done. ठीक है? We successfully initialized car. हमारा कार बन गया with the name of Maruti and the color green. Now, if I want to fetch car, तो ये मुझे return करेगा, object return कर रहा है. But let's say I want to return a particular property. How do I do that? I just want the car का name. I don't want all the other details for my web page. समझ मुझे सिर्फ car का name display करना है. So I'll just have to fetch car. I don't fetch car ऐसे because it will return me the whole object. There can be multiple properties. There are multiple methods. I will explain methods in just a while when I explain all functions. So objects is nothing but made up of multiple properties and methods. But for your car, मुझे सिर्फ name चाहिए, तो I'll just fetch that by car.name. Car.name will give me Maruti. There is another way. Car opening box bracket name in string closing box bracket enter. These two serve the same purpose. कोई भी चलता. But can anyone tell me why these two exist? दो methods क्यों? एक चल रहा है तो चलाओ ना, एक दूसरा क्यों चाहिए? Anyone has any ideas? Yeah. Maybe if you want to see multiple attributes at the same time, so we can use that. No, that won't return you that thing. But in case if you mention like a property के बीच में space है या कुछ, तो पहले वाला नहीं चलेगा ना. Example मैंने speed space value mention किया था property में. Wait, let me do one thing. Car को I'll assign a new this thing property. So if I do this, then I can insert a space over here, right? Now I'll hit enter. कार हो गया. कार का नया ऑब्जेक्ट बना है जिसमें नेम और कलर और वो सब नहीं है, सिर्फ स्पीड स्पेस वैल्यू वाला एक प्रॉपर्टी है उसमें. Now if I do car dot speed space value, नहीं आ रहा ना. So how do I fetch it? Car box bracket speed value and box bracket enter. आ गया. Okay, following so far? So just remember this much: objects are made up of properties and methods. About methods. Methods and functions mean the same. अगर object के अंदर तुम लोग ने function create किया है, तो it's a method. Otherwise, it's a function. Now about function first, then I'll go on to methods. Function is just a. हाँ. और who's not able to? Oh. Anyone? No one? Yeah, go ahead. Nice. So what two things does it have? Yeah? Properties and methods, right? Cool. Yeah. Should I repeat the following, Cam? Just raise your hand if you feel I need to repeat the following. I should? Anyone else? I'll repeat it, ठीक है. और क्या exactly repeat करना है? ऊपर से या नीचे वो space वाला चीज नहीं समझा था? Space वाला ना? So, car में curly braces के अंदर you mention a property. Let's say the property has a space. तो वो string में mention करना. As easy as that. If it does not have a space, let's say it just has speed, so just mention it like that. Space डालना है string, no space, it can be on its own. Cool? Yeah. Exactly, it has the space. देख अभी speed में मैं ऐसे ही mention कर रहा हूँ and I hit enter, works. हुआ code run, but if I say car is equal to speed value, but let's not put the colon, the quotation marks, this won't run, barabar? Because the property needs to have this thing, just one variable it needs to be. It can't have spaces in between it. Spaces चाहिए, string में डाल देना, easy. Cool? ठीक है, this is a very minor thing, let's not waste too much time behind this. Functions. So functions, why do we use functions? It helps us to reuse code. Why reuse code? Let's say there are complex like functionalities in a web page. Let's take the example of a login. तुम लोग वेबसाइट पे जाते हो, यूजर नेम डाला, पासवर्ड डाला, you click on the sign in or login button and you log in, right? You get to see the next page. So some function must be processing that data, saying, validating it, कि yes, this user, this email matches the password, it is authorized, it can move to its dashboard. These are complex, big lines of code, chunks of code that you need to have it in a function so that you can reuse it in different components throughout your web page. Cool. Let's take a small example of addition. Simple example. Addition करना है. Let's say there are too many additions that I need to do throughout the code. हर बार why should I write plus this plus 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 plus? No, I just mention a function. और कुछ complicated mathematical operation भी करना है मुझे, where addition, subtraction, multiplication, everything is involved. We can do it using functions. Functions simplify your code. It makes it shorter because you don't repeat your code. So it helps promote reusability of your code. Let's try it out. And also one thing, I'll explain when I'm typing it. So, how do we declare functions? Variables we declared using what? Var, let, const. Function कैसे declare करेंगे? We'll write function and the name of the function. Let's say addition. Okay? Are you all following me? Parentheses, the round brackets, जो shift 9 shift 0, ठीक है? Function, addition, parentheses, उसके बाद mention like the value num1, the first number that we want to add the second number that we want to add. These are called as parameters. Whatever is coming inside the parentheses are the parameters. They will be referred in the function ka code block to add for this case. For different examples, you can just refer to it, basically. Moving on, opening curly braces, hit enter. Now a function returns a value. Like it has to do something and then return that value so that we can use it, right? अगर उसने just like कुछ code execution कर लिया, but we don't get the value, point ही क्या है? So it needs to return some value that we can use it in our code. What we'll do is add करने के लिए return space num1 plus sign num2 semicolon. Return num1 plus num2 semicolon, hit enter, closing curly braces, hit enter. So हो गया 9, right? Yes, exactly. So function doesn't run ऐसे ही when you declare it. It executes when it is invoked. It has to be called somewhere. So let's say abhi I want to assign the value of 10 to x, but I want to add 2 plus 8 before that. What I'll do is, because the function is returning a value, remember that, var x is equal to addition parenthesis 2 comma 8 close parenthesis. Now semicolon, always remember, not needed, but for good coding practices we will always write the semicolon. JavaScript doesn't tell you कि like चाहिए ही चाहिए, it won't give you an error, but you should write it nonetheless. Hit enter. Why am I getting undefined? X का 10 नहीं आ रहा? Nice. Great. X is giving me the value of 10, just like I wanted it to. So there is one other way of declaring functions. It was introduced in ES6. It's just a standardization of JavaScript. Like I talked about standardization in HTML, right? अलग-अलग browsers अलग चीजें कर रहे थे, it got messed up. Just the same way, JavaScript has standardization. And ECMA script is what is the body that is used for standardizing JavaScript. Now it introduced a new concept of arrow functions. So arrow functions simplifies how you declare this function, right? So in order to do that, let's type var addition arrow function. Now you should note here that I typed A in capital and F in capital. Any reason why I should do this? Yes, it's called camel case. There's actually a good image that I saw yesterday. Let me. This is why it's called camel case. The first letter is small. All the other words that you use in this variable have to be capitalized. Only the first usme, pura nahi. So this is what is camel case, and this is what is used to write any variable in JavaScript. You'll see ahead that even functions and all are named like this. It's a convention we use, basically. So var addition arrow function is equal to parenthesis num1 comma num2. ठीक है? इसको after this give the arrow. Arrow is nothing but equal to and greater than sign. Equal to greater than sign. Arrow जैसा देखना चाहिए. Okay. After this, the beauty of arrow functions is you don't need to write the word return. Okay, now I'll just write num1. One more thing is not here. I want you all to identify और क्या था. This is none. I'll just go over it once. Where addition arrow function is equal to num is equal to in parentheses num1 comma num2 is equal to greater than, which is the arrow, num1 plus num2 semicolon. हो गया function declared. Easy. So इसमें return नहीं था that I mentioned. What other thing is not present in here? Anyone? Yes, the curly braces. Okay. Yes, great one. So the curly braces are also not present over here. अभी if I want to give the value y को value देना है 20 by adding two numbers, let's say 12 and 8. 20. ठीक है? This thing, its technical term is syntactic sugar. I know I'm throwing jargons, but bear with me. Syntactic sugar just gives you this concise syntax. कितना छोटा हो गया हमारा function, बराबर? वो सब additional चीजें we could remove out of this statement, right? So it just makes your syntax concise for the same functionality. That is what syntactic sugar is. Following? Great. So let's move forward. So I mentioned that objects have methods, right? Wait. In just this slide, I said objects have properties and methods. So वो क्या होता है? Properties तो हमने देखा कि like car में name था तो we'll give it a string. Car में speed का value, max speed value वैसा कुछ भी. Let's see what a function can be. A method can be in an object. Now all of this is there. So after this, I'll give it a method का value. So let's say मुझे method रखना है running. Okay. Now this, if this needs to be a method, it has to be a function. So यहाँ पे it was a string, any of the data types, right? But this needs to be a function. It needs to return something. So I'll use an arrow function over here and return car is running. ठीक है? Done. Now, how do I use this method? For property, what did we do? Dot name. It returned me the value of Maruti CS. Now, if I want to use this method, I'll do car dot running parenthesis. You can already see I got the output. So this is the method. Parenthesis end में लगा method, नहीं लगा तो property है. ठीक है? Anyone any doubts so far? Yeah, and I'm not rushing through these concepts, right? You all are grasping now. कुछ भी issue है तो please let me know.
Could you repeat this thing?
Method? Yeah. See, you understood functions, right? Functions returns some value. Objects में there are two things: properties, methods. Properties तो हमने कर लिया, कैसे करना है? Methods should have a function inside of it. For a property name, it had a string inside it, right? बराबर? Property का string था, return हो गया dots name करने पे. पर अगर समझ मुझे कुछ complex करना है object के साथ, I want to know if the car is running or not. So I'll create a method inside this object saying running और test running. वो complex function होगा जो calculate करेगा कितना fuel है, कितना mileage चलेगा, कितना kilometers are left for me, and if it is starting or not, सब कुछ, ठीक है? And in order to call that method, what I need to do is car.test running जो हमने बनाया वो या तो running in this case what I made and it will return me that value. वो जो function का value है ना वो मुझे return होगा. Understood? समझ अगर addition का भी मैंने function यहाँ implement किया होता ना तो मुझे वो addition करके दे देता. Cool? Great. Events. Now this is what is going to make dynamic changes in the web page. Events. Events are things that happen in HTML elements. What does that mean? Oh, this GIF is not working unfortunately, but it just shows that if you press the keyboard, then some event is triggered. On mouse click is one of the events that JavaScript has. So, when JavaScript is used in HTML pages, it can react to these elements. So, if there is some event that is triggered, JavaScript will run some code and make whatever changes that the developer needs should be made at an event. So this is what actually adds the dynamic feature, right? अगर एक button है and I click on it. Let's say the login page. Sign in का button, if I click on it, I should be signed in, right? That function is triggered. So I was talking about this function, right? कि complex function होता है, reusability बढ़ता है, you need to put it in functions. You should not keep writing your code, replicate it for the same thing. You can put it in functions. In order to trigger that function, on this event के मैंने click किया है, the on submit button, the on submit event will be triggered and the login का function will be implemented. Follow? Let me give another example. Hover. If you hover on a button and if you want to show the date, how do we do that? Let's see. So bring your VS Code ka the intro .html that I have made, you'll write. उसमें body में let's write some new tag. So the tag is button. Inside body nest button का tag. वो element के अंदर write show date. Save this much. Let's see how is it coming on our browser. Open in browser, show date. This is zoomed in, it won't look like that, but show date. Nothing's happening. No interactivity, right? So, in order to have some, in order to show the date, on clicking it, we'll write an event ka function. So the event that we will use is on click. ठीक है? On click. Note how it's a attribute over here for the HTML tag, right? And I had mentioned that attributes will customize your tag. This is the way it does. So this is JavaScript का event on click. इसके अंदर whatever you write is JavaScript का code, okay? So I'll write this dot inner HTML in caps. This dot inner HTML. This comes inside of onClick. onClick is equal to quotation marks this dot inner HTML. Then equal to date with a capital D and parenthesis. Okay, save this. Now, if we check our browser and hit reload, okay, hit reload. Now, if I click on this, date aa gaya. So some code is running, right? When I triggered this event, that function was executed. Function block that I just wrote. What was the function? This thing only. This one line that I have written is the function that I wanted to be executed, and it was successfully run on this event. So this is the gist of it. It helps add more features to your web page. It improves user experience. It actually enables user experience because this is what interacts with the user. Imagine if a static website is there, कुछ भी नहीं हो रहा, कुछ भी करने पर, gets boring, right? You won't get that many users to use your website if it doesn't respond to the user in some way. JavaScript and events enable it to. Okay. Moving on, we have document object model. These are some of the common events. We discussed on click, on change, on load. We'll discuss on load later as well. So, anyway. Document object model. And this is the crux of HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So I want everyone to pay attention to this particular concept. This rules everything because it can change everything in the document. And that is through JavaScript. So, objects mein, document object model. So obviously, it has properties and methods as we discussed for objects. These properties are values of the HTML elements that you just wrote down, right? कुछ element लिखा, उसमें attributes होता है, right? Like value, title, or let's say class, ID, class and ID. If I want to modify that element, I can do it using DOM. So document object model is in short known as DOM, and it can basically add, change, remove HTML elements. It can change the CSS style, and it can also create new events in the HTML. You see how it is manipulating HTML, JavaScript and CSS, everything. It is very powerful because this enables you to change everything in the structure of your file. Like समझ मुझे कुछ नया element डालना है, वो सब I can do through DOM. But now, what is DOM? So DOM treats the HTML structure as a tree. So a tree structure is nothing but where there is one root involved. उसके अंदर there are nodes. उसके अंदर there can be multiple nodes. So I'll explain this. While writing HTML का code, what did we do? HTML tag के अंदर सब भी nested, right? HTML is the root node of the document object model. So document करके एक variable है that JavaScript provides you. उसके अंदर root node is the HTML tag. उसके अंदर there are two different nodes, head and body, and all the rest of the nodes fall under these two. Now the leaf can have the text ka value, right? Whatever is inside that tag, between those opening and closing tags, that's the text. That is the leaf of a particular node. Let's say for example, P tag here, and uske andar I had written welcome everyone. So welcome everyone forms the leaf, and the P tag forms the node. Okay. So that is basically it. It's a complex structure, but it helps when you try to add or change stuff with the document structure. You can imagine, right? यहाँ पे if I want to eliminate one node, let's say body के अंदर H1 है, मुझे निकाल देना है because it's wrong. Or let's say I want to update it while the user is on the page. If the user does something and some sections are hidden, okay, for example, blogs, उसमें वो show more आता है ना? So show more अगर करते हो तो नीचे का content gets added, right? How? DOM. DOM helps you to add that content, add all those nodes that had all the content that was the whole of the blog. Just preview देगा, वो already होगा DOM में. But in order to add to that, DOM will help you add all of those nodes to the main जो भी div है जिसमें वो article था, division tag, right? So that is basically it. We will soon implement this, so just bear with me. I'm not showing you this in the console, but we'll implement this. There are basic functionalities that I mentioned, right? Okay, you can find HTML, create, delete nodes and stuff. So for finding HTML, there are these two main methods that we use. Document.getElementById and document.getElements by class name. Can anyone tell me why get element by ID and get elements by class name?
Class names can be multiple ID.
Yes. Yeah. So for the first method, you will get a single value that will be the object of the node. जो भी element था जिसका ID था, whatever particular thing that you mentioned, it will return you that single node. In case of get elements by class name, it will return you an array of all the objects, yeah, all the nodes I should say, that have the class name, whatever you mentioned. Now changing HTML elements. So एक बार we run this document.get element by ID, you receive the element. Now element dot inner HTML is the text that we get. वो जो leaf वाला part था ना यहाँ पे, the leaf text attributes are leaf, that is giving me the inner dot HTML. So जो भी HTML के properties है, attributes है, all of those I can retrieve from here. And not just retrieve, I can even change them. If I just write this much element dot inner HTML, तो मुझे उतना मिलेगा. But if I assign it some other value is equal to something else, it will change. It will execute that and it will change the value. और वो फिर तुम्हें दिखेगा भी कि वेबसाइट में let's say welcome everyone के जगह पे I write this function complex where I say okay, just change that inner HTML to good morning everyone. It will happen. So it can manipulate that structure, that content, everything. Next is element dot attribute. It can change the attribute ka value. Let's say element dot class. I want to assign it some new value. It will happen. Then element dot style dot properties, CSS के जो भी styles or properties थे, everything can be manipulated over here. And if you want to set attributes value, then you can use element dot set attribute comma value. समझ attribute class में मुझे कुछ अलग value डालना है, तो यहाँ से भी हो सकता है. So you can use either. You can use the equal to का sign and the set attribute का thing. Don't worry, we'll send over the PPT to you, so you can refer all of this material in case you guys can't read it at the back. Adding and deleting HTML elements. Now you can add certain nodes to this tree of the DOM and even remove some, right? As I mentioned, अगर कुछ heading या कुछ निकालना है, I can do that. Show more में add होता है. If I want to keep it concise, you can remove those nodes also. All of this is done using, there are multiple methods over here. We'll implement this, so I'll just briefly go over it. Document.create element, उसके अंदर you mention the node that you want to create, the element that you want to create, my bad. Then remove child, you mention the node that you want to remove. Dot append child, you mention the element that you want to append to the structure. Replace child replaces the node that is there with some other thing that you want to insert in there. And well, basically that's it. With that, we have covered all the fundamentals of JavaScript, at least in the scope of this workshop. Now I'll give you a break, quick recap of JavaScript concepts, and then we'll give you a 2-minute break. After which we'll start with the coding application, that is to-do list we'll make. So yeah, hang tight for like 10-15 minutes more. Quick recap, what are the different types of data types available in JavaScript? There were 5 available, anyone?
Number, string.
Yeah. I'm sorry, can someone repeat it? I didn't hear. Yeah.
Numbers, strings, boolean, arrays, and objects.
Yes, great. So functions. Which 2 ways can you declare a function? Anyone? Yeah. हाँ चलेगा, बैठ के बोल, आराम से बोल. नहीं. Question repeat करता हूँ. How can you declare functions? There are 2 methods, 2 ways that I showed. What were those? So one is the old method where you declare it as function, and the second method is the arrow function. Variables. Oh, do you all remember those 5 rules that you have to follow in order to declare a variable.
Cannot start with a number.
Yeah.
Can start with an underscore.
Yeah.
Dollar sign. Cannot use keywords. Keywords cannot be used. Keywords cannot be used.
Right. Great. Console. Why do we need console? Anyone? Why do we need console? Anyone? Yes, it's our best friend, right? It helps us compile JavaScript ka code. We need console to test it out. And finally, DOM. Can anyone tell me what is DOM? Yeah.
We can make changes to all the 3 components of the code, which is HTML, CSS, and Java.
Okay. But what is DOM? चलो से होता है ये, but what is it? Yeah. What is it? It's a tree structure. Yes. Great. Okay, with that we have recapped all the core concepts of JavaScript. Do you all want a 2-minute break or should we start with coding? Coding? Great. I like the energy right now. Okay, then let's. So for this, I'll recommend we use Replit rather than coding it on VS Code. Just because उसमें side में I can show you constantly how the browser will actually look. As a break. Okay, take a minute's break. Yeah. So repl.8 and hit enter. You will see this page. जिन्होंने login नहीं किया, obviously login नहीं किया होगा तुम लोगों ने. So first of all, create an account. Sign in using Google for now. I'll give you a second for that, and after that you will see this page. Mentees देख लेना अगर उन लोग का हो गया तो I'll get an understanding. Everyone has it logged in? Anyone, any issues trying to create an account? Please raise your hand. Great, let's proceed. Once you are on this page, I want you all to create a replica repository. It is very easy to do it. Left side में you'll see a create का button. This thing plus create. Click on it. You'll see this modal that pops up. Create a REPL के अंदर there are some templates already available. So we'll use one of those. Just write HTML, and the first thing that should come is HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Click on this. Title में put to do list or whatever you want it to be. ठीक है? Template HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Give it whatever title you all want. Click on create REPL. It's done. Abhi. So you see over here there are these three, mainly two things that we can, three things that we see. Yeah. First is code editor. ये left में जो भी ये code editor है, with the file structure, the file, individual file that we are on, that we are coding, and this web browser is there. That is the second thing. It will reflect whatever changes we make over here, और उसका preview देगा. And there is this console also below the browser. Anyway, so let's actually first of all clear this out. Head में keep only title. Title में to do list डाल दो. Head में और कुछ नहीं होना चाहिए. Remove everything else. Now body में you might be seeing script. So index.html firstly, let's so far you have made the title and body का इतना part. Now there is a script element in this body. This is what basically connects the JavaScript and the HTML together. So JavaScript will get all those functions and other various things that we make in JavaScript using this script. So HTML में this tag has to be there if you want to access those functions, basically. Okay? Now let us start writing HTML का code. H1 to do list. Hit run and your browser should actually show something like this. To do list आ जाना चाहिए H1 का header. Okay? Pretty basic. वो जो headings का पहला वाला जो level होता है, this is that. Only one throughout the entire HTML page. After this, let us create an input element so that we can take users का tasks. Whatever to do का list उसको बनाना है, he can do it using that input. So let's write the input element. Below H1, write input. Type is equal to text. Let's hit run. So we can see here, right? Heading आ गया and this input is here. We can type to do go for morning walk. If I hit enter, nothing's happening right now, right? I want the user to be able to create I want the JavaScript to be able to create a list based on whatever the input is present over here. So firstly we need a submit button for that. Like input तो है, but not submit button as such. We'll create a button जिस पे click करने पे ये जो भी input में value है, the value right now is go for morning walk. That value should be added to a list. So like first let's create a list. ये placeholder list है. And let's make an unordered list. So what tag should be used for an unordered list? UL. Yeah, UL. OL is ordered list, UL is unordered list. UL, hit enter. उसके अंदर list items के लिए क्या tag होता है? So wake up at 6 AM, reach LI, reach seminar hall at 7:30 AM. Now if you run this, you can see कि मेरा एक to do list बना है जिसमें 2 items are already there. The list has 2 items. Wake up at 6 AM. Reach seminar hall at 7:30 AM. Now, if I want to add to this list, zoom. Wait. ठीक है? This is what should be there on your browser. If you want the code, then I'll. This is what it will look like. UL के अंदर 2 LI के tags है, and it gives the list. ठीक है, so अभी input लेना है हमें, so we'll have to write some function for it. But before that, let's create that button that we wanted to, जिस पे click करके वो input का value should be added to this list, unordered list that we created. So input के नीचे button, and I'll write add for it. So if you run this now, input के बाजू में एक button आ जाएगा that has the text add. Now let's say to-do list में I'll write take afternoon nap. And now if I click on add, I want it to be added to this list actually. अभी input वाला हमने element setup किया, button setup किया, but it's not getting added, right? You see, Java HTML is not able to handle this. You will have to use JavaScript for it. So far, एक heading with to-do list, input, where we'll add whatever new item that we want to add in the to-do list. A button with the name add. On clicking it, some function should be triggered which will add this actual value to the list in the DOM structure. And नीचे दो values मैंने दो list का मैंने already hard code कर लिया कि first is wake up at 6 AM, second is read seminar hall at 7:30 AM. So just follow along for these two things and I'll let you know why I'm doing it while we are coding for JavaScript. Give this the ID of text input. So input में an attribute ID of the value text input. Input का I should be capital, camel case. Another thing we'll add is button में an event. So which event should be added over here if I want to trigger click वाला? Yes, on click. इसके अंदर what usually comes? I'm sorry, can you speak louder? अच्छा, who was saying? इसके अंदर क्या आना चाहिए? Anyone any idea? No, not every time. Only for that particular example I had written this .inner.html. इसके अंदर anything JavaScript can come. Some JavaScript code should come over here. ठीक है? We just mentioned a function. We haven't created it. We'll create it. Just write add task parenthesis. So this is just some JavaScript का function that will be triggered when this event on click takes place. So two things we added right now. एक है input का ID, text input, button का on click वाला element, add a task. One more thing. UL में add an ID of the name tasks. UL में add an ID attribute with the value of tasks. All of this will be helpful when we are making the function of add task. वो ही like एक ही चीज करना है हमें JavaScript में. Just give me a second. That is to make that add task का function. Okay, so followed so far? Everyone good? Please give me a yes. Yes. Great. थोड़ा कम आवाज था. Give me a stronger yes, please. Yes. Great. So let's let's move on to the script.js जहाँ पे we'll actually mention the add task का function. So how do we declare a function? Write function add task parenthesis curly braces. Hit enter. Function add task. Let me zoom. Function add task. Parentheses and curly braces. So over here I want to receive the value of the input, right? वो जो भी input में मैंने लिखा था वो मुझे value यहाँ पे चाहिए. So let's write var input text is equal to. Now वो जो element में जो value था, input वाला element है, उसका value is whatever the user types inside of that input field. To get that, what do we use? DOM, right? So document dot get element by ID. Document is a variable that JavaScript provides. वो DOM जो था ना document object वो ये है. So this will get you that element by ID. What was the ID that we used for the input? Text input, right? हमें input का value चाहिए, मुझे UL का inner HTML नहीं चाहिए, right? Unordered list का ID was tasks. If I execute the code document.get element ID, get element by ID, and I mention tasks, वो मुझे ये दो list देगा, list items. I don't want that. मुझे input का value चाहिए ना, तो I'll have to mention that ID. Text input, okay? So from here, get element by ID, quotation marks, get text input. Now element dot value याद है जो we used for this thing, this dot inner HTML. Inner HTML is a property of the HTML element. तो वैसे ही यहाँ पे input का value चाहिए था ना मैं, so element मिल गया, उसके बाद dot value to get its value. Basically this will just return you the value that was inside the input when the user typed it. Easy. इसके नीचे write this one thing for now. We will not display it on the browser for the moment. We will display it in the console. So write console dot log. Log is nothing but log. Console में जो log होता है वहां पे दिखाएगा, एक output आएगा of input text. So ये जो variable हमने declare किया, that is having the value of the input element, that will be logged on the console. Hit save, run it. जो अभी नीचे जो console था ना, bring that up. I'm sorry, I'll have to zoom out, but what you need to do is ये जो run करके ये input में just type anything, okay? Go take afternoon break, take afternoon nap, and I click on add. What is happening on your screens? Yes, आया? कुछ text output आ रहा है? Successful ना, वो value मिल गया ना जो input में चाहिए था. So JavaScript can now add it in the DOM का structure also. For now we just add it in the console. बाद में we can also add it in the DOM, and that's exactly what we are trying to do over here. Take a minute's time, try it out again if you feel so. Input में just enter some value, click the button add. What is happening is on click event is being triggered, that is executing the code add task, and add task में हम वो value fetch कर रहे हैं from DOM and वो value को log कर रहे हैं. Okay? Now let's add this value that we received in the DOM structure. Any difficulties or should I proceed? Anyone having any doubts, please raise your hand. अगर नहीं हो रहा कुछ. Okay, let's proceed then. So now, in order to add a child in this list, let's actually get this list. पहले जो भी list में है, unordered list में अभी 2 ही items हैं. Let's receive that and let's add this text का value to it. And then we'll put this thing inside this DOM structure again. तो बाद में क्या होगा, ये 2 जो है उसके नीचे एक और आ जाएगा, ठीक है? So to do this, we had created that ID right for UL. That was tasks. So what we'll do is var task list. Var task list is equal to document dot get element by ID document dot get element by ID इसमें tasks. So I'll get the unordered list वाला node. वो पूरा node मिलेगा and उसमें 2 child nodes है list items. I want to add another one जो input में था. So task list dot inner HTML. Inner HTML usually what was it returning to us so far? Whatever was inside that element, right? पर अब तक हमने वैसा कुछ fetch किया था जिसके element के अंदर सिर्फ वो text था. Inside UL there is not just text, there are 2 elements. So it will return those 2 elements also. ठीक है? So this dot inner HTML is giving us those 2. Let me show you the code. These 2 list elements. So dot inner HTML में ये तो मिल रहा है, not some one of these like wake up at 6 AM or something. It's giving those 2 elements to me. Now I want to add a value right to this. So I want to add another element below this. ये जो list item 2 मिल गए, उसके नीचे एक और list item डालना है, so that browser पे दिखेगा. After adding, so what I'll do is task list dot inner HTML is equal to. Now we want to preserve these 2 list items, right? उसको उड़ा नहीं देना है. So don't just insert the value of the new task. Otherwise वो 2 वाले values चले जाएंगे. So you'll have to include those first. Task list dot inner HTML. So far task list dot inner HTML is equal to task list dot inner HTML. So that those 2 list items are also preserved. उसके बाद we add this tag list in strings. In strings add li. Opening tag of li list element. Here's the HTML code if you want to refer it for a while. Any issues, please raise your hand. In the JavaScript code? Okay, yeah. So HTML is done. Let's finish this off. Task list, you get the element which has all the lists in it, list items in it. Now we'll add the new list item that we have. So task list dot inner HTML is equal to task list dot inner HTML plus in strings list opening tag of list item plus the input text. Opening tag plus input text plus closing tag. So we'll in strings so let's run this now. Now write anything that you want in the input and click on add. What do you see? Anyone? Ho gaya? Great. Who's having difficulties with this? JavaScript? Anyone still facing any difficulties, or you can see the list item being added? If you have any difficulties, please raise your hand so we can help you sort it out. Okay, so this was a very basic implementation, to be honest. We didn't use the DOM-K methods that are available to actually manipulate this HTML file that we have. So let's look into that now. So firstly, let's remove those two list items that we had created. Let's not hard code it like this. HTML में नहीं चाहिए कुछ भी. Let's keep it clear. Sirf UL ID is equal to tasks, and that's about it. Keep it empty. So our HTML file has been reduced. Sirf input button and this thing UL unordered list, and it's done. What we'll do is we'll create JavaScript में what type of variable should we make, what data type should it have if I want to list down the strings, that will be the tasks. Whatever I want to insert in the to-do list. So let's write an array. Var is equal to tasks. Var tasks is equal to box bracket. Wake up at 6 a.m. Reach seminar hall at 7:30 a.m. So now what I've done is I've removed it from my HTML code, which is hard coded था वहाँ पे. I've inserted it in JavaScript का array. So now if I run this code, you will see that there is nothing in the on my web page. Like ये दो टास्क जो मैंने array में डाले वो तो आने चाहिए ना. उसका पॉइंट ही क्या JavaScript में डाल दिया, अभी HTML में नहीं दिख रहा. So firstly, let's add it on our HTML document. So these two tasks are there, and I want to add it on our web page. We use the event called onLoad. So what it basically means is when the website, the window loads, it should execute some function. That is what we are trying to do. So we'll write window dot onLoad. Window dot onLoad is equal to, we'll specify which function we need to run over here. ठीक है? So JavaScript क्या करेगा? Whenever this window loads, ये वाला जो function that we specify, it will run it. What function do we need to specify over here? We need to add all those tasks in our DOM structure. तो वो हम यहाँ पे करेंगे. So we'll have to write the function over here. Is equal to function parenthesis curly braces, right? Window dot onLoad is equal to function parenthesis curly braces. इसके अंदर let's get all those and let's create a string that we will add to our DOM structure. So let's write tasks in HTML is equal to an empty string. इसमें what we'll do is we'll make the opening tag plus the content plus the closing tag for the entire list. जो task का जो list है यहाँ पे दो ही elements है उसमें. What we'll do is we'll iterate through the array. We'll go over all the elements that are in the array and we'll append to this tasks in HTML वाला string. What we'll do is we'll add the opening tag, that is li. We'll add this task का array का first वाला element का value, then the closing tag. Then again we'll add the opening tag, task का second element का value, that is the string value. उसके बाद में closing tag. So let's do that. So tasks dot for each. This is a function that JavaScript provides. सीधा लिख दो. Tasks dot for each. इसमें we just iterate over the tasks. ये जो array था उसके through we'll iterate. For each, इसमें we'll write task. This will give you the individual element. Like जो भी array में था ना, उसका एक element मुझे मिलेगा यहाँ पे. It will iterate over it, so it will get the next element in the next iteration. पहले मुझे वो पहला वाला element मिलेगा, उसके बाद second वाला. पहला element was wake up at 6, second was reach seminar hall at 7:30. Now this is an arrow function for task equal to greater than sign. Write these curly braces for this one. Now we'll append to our tasks in HTML wala element. What we need to append? Opening tag plus the task plus the closing tag. Am I right? No. Because what will happen is, if I do this, मेरा जो second वाला element है, उसके iteration के time वो ही task आएगा. I need to preserve my first element, right? So I'll write tasks in HTML is equal to tasks in HTML plus this thing. What will happen is, इसमें there will be a string that is created task in HTML, जिसमें सारे values में फिर वो append हो रहा है. Got it? It was an empty string initially. After the first iteration, it will be one element list item का, जिसके बीच में वो first iteration, जो first task का जो value था वो होगा, and opening and closing tags हो गया. Second iteration के बाद first वाला element will be preserved, second element will be added. Okay. Now this thing we just need to add in our document. So document dot get element by ID. The ID is tasks क्योंकि unordered list tasks में है. Dot inner HTML is equal to tasks in HTML. I'll repeat this once. Document dot get element by ID tasks dot inner HTML is equal to tasks in HTML. That's it. Done. You hit run, and now double quotes miss हुआ था, and this is done, right? Now I can see those. I hope everyone is able to see it on your screens. If you are having a doubt, please raise your hand so our mentees can sort it out. Okay. Moving on. Now इसका जो element add करना है, we'll use DOM का create element and append child for it. Don't worry, we'll send all this code. तो like जितना भी catch up हो रहा है वो करो. If something is left out, do not stress about it. Just follow along for the moment. So yeah, इसके बाद what we'll do is we'll create an element of the input text that we want to insert in our list. So we'll पहले तो let's append this input का value, input text का value that we got from input to our task का array. So tasks dot append input text. After this, we'll try to change this part. ये जो statement है that we are just inserting the inner HTML. We'll not do this. We'll create an element and we'll append the child. So for that, create a node by typing var node is equal to document dot create element. इसके अंदर you need to specify what tag you are trying to create. That is LR, list element. You just need to append that list element inside the unordered list. Next is var create a text node is equal to document dot create Inside this, you will mention the new value that you want to append. So it is input text. So let's do one thing. If you are having trouble trying to catch up with this, we'll send over the code for this. Abhi, take a break because the note session is also there after this. We'll send you over the code, go through it once. If you have any queries, yes, contact the mentors for any queries. So that's about it for the front-end session. We'll end it over here. If there are any doubts, please raise your hand. I'll try to answer them. Otherwise, we'll wrap up this session and you can have the break.